Written books, biographies about some of the best. Bob Dylan, Julia Child, the Beatles. His newest book is called Reagan, An American Journey. Bob Spitz, welcome to Big 550 KTRS.
Thanks very much, McGraw. Good morning.
Why is it so hard, or why has it been so hard, to write a biography about Ronald Reagan?
Well, you know, he wasn't a reflective man. So anyone who had access to Reagan directly wasn't able to crack that shell and get him to talk about himself and go deep. So, you know, at this point where he's not around anymore, I decided to make an end run and talk to about 35 people, 350 people who either knew him, worked with him, had inside information about him. And I was lucky enough to have Nancy Reagan grant me access to his private papers, those that were in his office, where he wrote down so many of his thoughts that gave me much more, I think, of an insight into Reagan, and was able to get a better profile of this kind of mysterious man who we think we know but don't really know.
Yeah, it's a great point. He was the few cracks in the armor that we've seen. He was a very different man than he portrayed publicly. Not better or worse, just different.
Yeah, you know, he was used to being in front of a camera when he was an actor and when he was on TV, and also as a radio personality in the early days of broadcasting. So there was always that barrier between him and his audience that kind of saved him from having to show more of himself. And I thought, you know, I had to dig deeper and get just a more accurate portrayal of the man.
You went from cradle to grave. You did the whole thing. That is a monumental task for a man like Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, it took about nearly 6 years, and I really began, as I begin all my books, going to where they live, because I don't think that you can really describe who a person is and get to know them before you know where they come from. So I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, talking to a lot of historians there, the people who knew Ronald Reagan, knew the family, and slowly, little by little, you know, he began to come alive.
I love the line in Back to the Future when Marty McFly goes back to Dr. Brown and he says, yeah, who's president in 1985? And he says, Ronald Reagan. You know, so to a man in 1955, Ronald Reagan being president is so strange. How did he go from relatively, you know, B actor, right? He wasn't a super movie star. He wasn't John Wayne. How did he go from that to such an iconic political figure?
Well, you know, while he was in Hollywood, he was such a chatterbox about politics. He was obsessed with politics. And between takes of his movies, he would just talk politics on the set. In fact, actors at Warner Brothers didn't want to sit next to him at lunch because they knew that all he would do would be talking politics. So, you know, after his career tanked, his movie career, after he got, you know, kind of old to play those parts, he gave a speech for Barry Goldwater as Goldwater's candidacy was really stalled, and Reagan went on TV, and the wealthy businessmen who backed Goldwater realized that the wrong candidate was on the ticket, that Reagan was so telegenic, so charming, thoughtful, that they decided from that moment on to launch Ronald Reagan into politics.
He was a very religious man, which he kept very close to the vest, and people find that odd.
Yeah, you know, people didn't think he was religious at all, because while he was in office for the 8 years, he didn't go to church. And he didn't go to church because he felt that the presence of the Secret Service detail would really detract from the prayer services and the people who were going there. But his mother really instilled a really deep faith in Ronald Reagan. He taught Sunday school as a kid. You know, he was baptized very early in his life. He was always deeply reverent, and so his religion stayed with him even while he was president, and wasn't so and didn't try to put religion in people's face, which was one of the great things about Ronald Reagan. He thought religion was private.
Reagan is the book, An American Journey. Bob Spitz. Bob, what in this book is your favorite part that you uncovered?
Oh boy, you know, I was really lucky. I was emailing with a source in Paris, and I finally said, "Can I come over and speak to you personally?" And I got to spend 3.5 hours with Olivia de Havilland, who was just on the cusp of her 100th birthday, and she took me through Ronald Reagan's Hollywood career and his presidency of the Screen Actors Guild and all the turbulence of the blacklist during those years in Hollywood, moment by moment. And it was such a wonderful experience hearing from someone who was actually there, who had actually been on camera with Ronald Reagan.
Wow, that is a great story. Bob Spitz, what would Ronald Reagan say about the politics of today?
Well, if you're very quiet, you can hear Reagan turning over in his grave. I think that's the short answer. Ronald Reagan was a unifier, not a divider, and he was a very humble man. He didn't have a hostile bone in his body, and so I think that this would be a very unfamiliar turf to him today.
Go back and listen to his speech at the Brandenburg Gate and see how far politics have gone from that speech to today.
Exactly. Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall.
Yeah.
It was really the end of the Cold War and the demise of the Soviet Union. And while Reagan wasn't responsible for it, he certainly helped he contributed to bringing it down.
And the great story is they told him, don't put that in there, right? Don't put that in there.
Absolutely not. We had a policy of containment with the Soviet Union, and they said to him, don't make any incendiary remarks. But he thought, to hell with that. I'm going to say how I feel over the objection of the State Department. And he said the line stays. And when he delivered that line, the people, the Berliners who were in the audience, they went nuts. They went crazy. It was wonderful. It transformed them.
The book is called Reagan, An American Journey. Bob Spitz, you've done a great work with Bob Dylan, Julia Child, the Beatles, and now Ronald Reagan. Reagan, An American Journey. Bob Spitz, good luck with the book, and thanks for spending a couple minutes with us.
Thanks, McGraw. Good morning.